The Colours That Blind, Chapter 12, 26th of March 1975. I saw him again today, Matthew. He found me when no one was looking, when I was by the sink scrubbing pots. "Thandie," he said, and my heart stood still while I fought to keep myself turning to him. His voice came closer. "Come on, I know you can hear me. You can't ignore me forever." I hesitated, eventually gave in and turned. His hands were muddy as though he had been handling dirt. "Matthew," I said, only to acknowledge his presence. "Can we talk?" he hissed, peeping quickly behind him. We both know why he whispered. I think I almost understand it, but somehow it still angers me when I think about it, that talking to me has to be a secret he keeps. I turned back to the pots in my sink, giving my back to him. "Thandie, listen, I know the way things were when I left was not ideal, and it's mostly my fault. I promise if I could change it, I would." I paused with my hands sunk in the water. "Mostly your fault?" I echoed. "All my fault. I meant it was all my fault, and there's not a single day I haven't thought about it." "Not a single day, you say?" I asked, turning again to face him. He smiled, and as he stood by the doorway looking at me, all the memories came flooding back. "Okay, so maybe I skipped a few days here and there, but there were a lot of single days I thought about it." He walked towards me and stopped by the kitchen table, grinning from ear to ear. I'd almost forgotten how he smiles with his eyes, making their almost greyish-blue colour dance. I'd forgotten how his cheeks and the tips of his ears always flush a slight pink as his lips stretch into a smile. I'd forgotten how his smile could make you feel better, like some kind of medicine. All I'd remembered was how he left, and how I'd felt the day I found out. It had erased everything else. "I'm glad to finally see that beautiful smile of yours. I'd missed it." I snapped back to the present and turned back to my dishes. I started scrubbing the pot in the sink, trying to undo the memories, to shoo away the past. My voice went low and quiet. "So how was your trip to England?" I could hear the wooden kitchen table creaking. I think he must have sat down or leaned heavily on it, but I said nothing. "You believe me though, don't you? I know I shouldn't have left the way I did. I should have... I'm sorry, Thandie." I frowned. I was unsure what I hated more, the fact that he had unapologetically erased everything of that night, or the fact that I didn't want him to. I stood there, trying to iron out the stubborn creases in my mind. My head was a volcano, spilling wildly with unexplained and mixed emotions, all difficult to understand. The cold touch of a strong, coarse-palmed hand pulled at my elbow. I jumped as nerves sent alarm bells ringing through me. Not from Matthew's touch itself, but because the last coarse hand that had touched me had been firmly pressed against my throat the other day. He took a small step back from me, confusion crisscrossing his features. "I really am sorry, Thandie. I really am. You must know that." He looked down with what looked like remorse splashed across his whole demeanour. "I don't know what else to say, but I moved closer to where he stood. I leaned on the table beside him and nudged him with my elbow playfully. "I know. Now let's put all that silliness behind us. Tell me about all the mischief you caused there in England." Footsteps suddenly sounded in the corridor, heading our way and capsizing our little moment. I slowly moved back to the sink while watching Matthew out of the corner of my eye, walking swiftly to the other side of the kitchen, wearing a different face. The missus walked in. "Won't you join us, darling? What are you doing in here?" Her eyes focused only on him, almost erasing me from the room. I looked down and returned to scrubbing the pot. "I was just telling Girlie here to make a cup of tea for me. 2 sugars, no cream, please." I glanced at him and nodded. "Yes, Bass." I am still stuck with the picture of his back as he walked away, following his aunt from the kitchen. And as though he knew the war that had exploded in my head, he paused, turned, and mouthed a silent apology. I remember the little ball of fiery anger that fluttered in my stomach, but I also remember the smile I gave him as though it were custom. And as I stood there watching his frame disappear into the corridor, I thought again of that day all those years back. There are questions I can't shake that bubble up in my mind. Can things be so easily swept away and all ills and complexities forgotten? Or do we try to conjure up false truths that console us? False truths that leave us at once feeling that our humanity isn't so damning?